Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing this matters most to your ex. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. Check out my socials for extra content. The links are in the description. So now let's get back into today's podcast, and today we are discussing this matters most to your ex. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, it can be confusing to know what matters most to your ex-dumper. In today's podcast, I'll be discussing the order of events that matter most to your ex. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is in last place. So first of all, we're going to be speaking about last place and the thing which matters least to your ex, and that is the breakup itself. Now what I mean by this is what actually happened at the time of the breakup matters least to most dumpers going forward. And therefore, if you want to try to get your ex back, it's really important you stay as relaxed as possible about what actually happened during the breakup. Now, maybe you were dumped via text, maybe you were dumped over the phone, or maybe you were dumped in person. But certainly, there would likely have been some back and forth, to say the least, about what actually happened, where, when, and how. Now, during that time of the breakup, things are likely to have got emotional. That's very natural. It's understandable. Please don't beat yourself up, dumpies. Nobody here listening to today's podcast is a robot. We're all human beings, and we're all going to act like a human. And that is very unlikely to be cool, calm, and collected if we've been dumped. Now, when I'm speaking about the breakup itself, sometimes it's not something which just lasts a text or two or a phone call or even a meeting in person. Sometimes the breakup could actually be described as moving over a number of days potentially before things are absolutely finalised. You need to read between the lines, you need to think about your own situation and just realise there isn't a one-size-fits-all scenario here, but you will understand what constituted as your breakup. Was it something that happened very quickly, very swiftly, and then that was that? Or did it drag on over a few days in various kinds of ways? The way I describe the breakup coming to its conclusion is when the dust begins to settle. It doesn't mean that you like it. It doesn't mean that you're happy. And in fact, if you're listening to today's podcast, I very much doubt that you were happy during the breakup itself. But you know what I mean. When the breakup took place, whatever happened, whatever interactions, however you acted, this is in last place regarding what your ex-dumper will deem as important going forward. So for those of you who beat yourself up, for those of you who get really upset because you got upset, and maybe you think, okay, my ex-dumper is never going to want me back because I feel like I made a fool of myself. You know, I said this and I said that and I felt emotional and I wasn't my best self and now I think they will never take me back. Well, let me tell you, dumpies, this is very low on the priority list of what your ex-dumper is likely to consider if and when in the future they may decide to want to reconnect. Now, does this mean you can definitely get your ex back? Well, I would always say there is a possibility that you can, but there is no guarantees. There is no 100% guaranteed way to get an ex back. Nothing works 100% of the time, and nothing fails 100% of the time. And I can't say for certain, definitively, that what you may have done or said at the time of a breakup isn't going to have affected something in your ex-dumper's mind. Because, of course, I don't know your exact situation. You know, your dumper is not going to forget if you, for instance, became violent. You know what I'm saying here? If you did something extreme, then you might be in the position where, unfortunately for yourself, your ex-dumper is going to hold something against you. Now, what I'm talking about is generally speaking. Generally speaking, violence or anything extreme doesn't actually take place at the time of a breakup. but it is likely to be emotional. Things are likely to be said. Words which maybe you now regret saying may have come out of your mouth. Maybe you sent a text message which now you wish you hadn't have done. These are the things I'm talking about when I say that they are least likely, out of everything we're talking about in today's podcast, to affect your ex-dumper going forward about potentially one day reconnecting with you. And I therefore want you to forgive yourself, dumpees, if you feel that you behaved in a way which now you regret and maybe you feel a bit embarrassed by. But, as I said a moment ago, if you did something extreme, and I used the example of violence, but it could be other potential things, we have to use our common sense. And there will be certain things that you may have done which aren't going to be as easily forgiven or forgotten by dumpers. But generally speaking, most of you listening, most of you dumpees who have been dumped, acted understandably emotional, acted like a human, and therefore you may have been shocked, upset, said things, text things, did things, maybe you feel embarrassed. If you did those types of things and now you're beating yourself up, please stop, please forgive yourself, because it's in last place about what actually matters to your ex, the dumper. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast. Please like this video if you're watching on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. And point number 2 is second place. So out of the 3 positions we're going to be speaking about in today's podcast, point number 2 is second place. You know, it makes a lot of sense for it to be done that way. And in second place, the runner-up in what's most important to your ex-dumper is the past relationship. So let me explain what I mean here. We've just said in point number 1 that the breakup holds the least value, the least importance to your ex-dumper going forward if they were to possibly consider reconnecting with you in the future. Now, in second place is the actual relationship that you once had together. Now, sadly, and obviously with you listening to today's podcast, sadly, that relationship is no more. That relationship ended. Your ex became the dumper. They lost romantic emotional attraction for various potential reasons, and when it hit the necessary low point, they actioned the breakup. That relationship is currently over, but hopefully if you want your ex back, this is something that one day in the future you can reconnect. And the relationship that you had in the past, the relationship that you wish never ended, that is in second place in the importance regarding your ex-dumper's thoughts. So your ex-dumper, when they're considering everything about if, when, how, why, maybe you could reconnect, possibly they've made a mistake, should they reconsider, when they're thinking about everything in turn, the relationship that you had does have and does hold a level of weight. It's not the most important thing about them considering reconnecting with you, but it is certainly, in their mind, more important than the breakup. So, for instance, if you behaved in a way during the breakup where, as I suggested, maybe you was overly emotional, maybe you said a few things that you now regret, well, your ex-dumper, when they're thinking clearly, could probably understand why that may have been the case. But what is going to hold more weight and what is going to be potentially less forgivable is the way that you treated your ex-dumper during the relationship itself. Because the relationship is somewhat important. It's in second place. It's holding value. Now, some of you who have listened to my podcasts in the past might think, well, what about the fading effect bias? Okay, now the fading effect bias is something which suggests that negative memories fade soon over time in comparison to positive memories. Meaning, and trying to explain it in a simplistic way, we wear rose-tinted glasses. We look back on the past in a more favourable light than potentially what actually took place. Now, yes, the fading effect bias will come into play. And if your relationship was rocky, your ex-dumper is likely to think back to the times you had together which were good and have and hold more value in them than the moments which were not so great. Absolutely, the fading effect bias will work in your favour. However, they're not going to forget everything. And this is why it's really important. The fading effect bias isn't like that implement used in that movie Men in Black where they can wipe someone's memory. You know, unfortunately, the fading effect bias doesn't work that way, and therefore your ex-dumper will remember moments which took place. What the fading effect bias does is that the negative situations hold less weight, hold less value over time, but they're not completely forgotten, and anything major will certainly be remembered. And this is why the relationship itself is in second place. It does hold importance. If you had a bad relationship by and large, if you're being honest, you can't understand why it lasted so long anyway, maybe because you acknowledge you treated your ex-dumper badly, or perhaps you were not a great girlfriend or not a great boyfriend, then you have to understand that your ex-dumper will remember this, and they will, to some degree, hold this against you. Whereas the breakup itself, as we've already said, depending on exactly what you did, by and large, generally speaking, your dumper may give you a pass, potentially for things you may have said or done, due to the fact it was very emotional, and they know that they hurt you badly. But in the relationship when you were together, if you did, said, acted in certain ways which the dumper didn't feel was kind, appropriate, or something which was understanding, this isn't something they're going to give you a pass on. So, fading effect bias or not, you can't get away with bad behaviour in most instances throughout a relationship. And that's why the relationship does hold weight. And that's why when we're talking about today's podcast, what matters most to your ex, the relationship that you had together matters somewhat. You could say it matters a lot. When they're reconsidering their decision, when they're looking back at the past, when they're thinking to themselves, have I made a mistake? When they are actually reflecting on the decision that they made, the relationship that you had together is going to play a major role in whether or not they decide to potentially reach out to you and see if things can be sorted out moving forward in a way where you reconnect. Now, if you would like advice and support about how to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Go to my website www.dateme.tips for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. Talking about your feelings can also improve your mental health. It helps prevent the build-up of negative emotions, which can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical health issues. Speak your heart to free your mind. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast about this matters most to your ex. And point number 3 is what matters most to your ex. It is the main, ultimate thing that your ex-dumper is going to be considering when they want to really understand whether they've made the right decision or not in ending your connection. And point number 3, what matters most to your ex is post-breakup. It's the future. The way you behave post-breakup is going to hold most weight in regarding to whether your ex-dumper decides that they want to reconnect. Now, I've said throughout today's podcast about whether your ex-dumper wants to reconnect, but please remember, you also have a huge say in this. This isn't just about your dumper thinking, yeah, I want to reconnect now, and they get in touch with you and you reconnect. Now, you have a big say in this. If and when they reach out to you, you might not want to reconnect anymore, and that's absolutely fine. You don't owe your ex-dumper anything. You're single right now. You can live your life the way that you wish. You shouldn't be dancing to their tune necessarily if they want to reconnect. But if you do want to get back together and you hear from your ex, then absolutely this should be something that you consider. You should think, okay, they want to get back together. I want to get back together. Let's make this happen. Now, the main and ultimate reason why your ex-dumper is likely to want to reconnect with you is probably going to be mainly based on this point number 3, because it is the most important reason. It's what matters most to your ex-dumper, and that's the future. It's post-breakup. It's how you behave post-dumping. So after the breakup is settled, remember in point number 1, I said the breakup constitutes as up until the dust has settled, when things are somewhat calm because you both know the position. Maybe they weren't calm for long, and therefore we can instantly see the problem. Maybe the breakup has clearly been defined, but you decide you don't want to let things go, and you start to text your ex, and you start to chase your ex. Maybe you're being particularly negative, maybe you're being particularly needy, maybe you won't let things go, and you start harassing your dumper. This is what I'm talking about. This is post-breakup. the way you behave post-breakup is going to have the most influence on your dumper about what they do beyond and into the future. If you want to get your ex back and you're thinking, what matters most to my ex? Well, it's actually how you're behaving post-breakup. Yes, the breakup matters somewhat, but not as much as the relationship that you had together. And both of those elements pale in comparison to the future. It doesn't matter if you had a great relationship. It doesn't matter if your breakup was somewhat calm. If you start acting in a negative way post-breakup, you won't get your ex back. And negativity could be defined as being needy, could be defined as being desperate, or could be defined as being abusive and horrible. It doesn't matter how we define this precisely, but what we're saying is, if you don't behave in the right way post-breakup, you are reducing your chance of getting your ex back. But on the flip side, if you behave in a positive way, focusing on your own journey, living your life to the full, not chasing your ex, instead trying to make new connections by growing as a person every single day to become a version 2.0 of yourself, you will increase the chance of one day getting your ex back. Because when your ex reflects on things, they will be reflecting on the order that I've described today. And the most powerful, most important, what matters most to them is how you behave post-breakup. So make sure that you live your life the right way. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.